What if this video is the most important story ever told? Instead of asking the question, I should just declare that, right? Come on, have some confidence in yourself. The most important story ever told is a question I sort of ask myself with everything I read or watch, any sort of media I consume, because it's fun, whether I'm reading Dostoevsky or a newspaper comic or a graphic novel about a sentient space fungus. It's not a claim of quality, it's a way of paying attention. What if this thing I'm reading or watching or whatever suddenly becomes like Bible scale important? That question is going to drive everything I want to talk about today. It's more of a way of exploring how we assign narrative importance to our ideas. And we're going to look at standalone stories versus like series fiction and why almost all the advice out there points you towards one of those at the expense of the other. So before I go into this stuff, I want to define a term, do that super annoying philosopher thing to define your terms up front. But if I don't, what I say next is going to sound like a value judgment, which it isn't. So I'm going to use the term literary a lot here. And by literary, I don't mean better. I'm using that term as a genre label, a specific approach to doing something. A literary work could be a book, a film, or a comic. It could be a painting, I suppose. Why not? Why not? Why did I dismiss that so easily? A literary work starts from an idea, which is like an observation about life or people or society, and then the story forms itself around that idea. Whereas like a genre work tends to start in the other direction. Someone has a what if Dracula in space, or something, and the bigger themes show up as they're writing the story, because we're all human, so anything we make ends up being about more than the plot anyway. Neither direction is more legitimate than the other. They do behave differently when it comes to series. Genre fiction tends to work well as a series because it's built on a consistent world. Readers want to believe the characters exist off the page or when nobody's watching, because you can keep checking up on them that way. Literary fiction doesn't really have that pull, or like a literary film, which might tend toward the more surreal, because the point isn't the ongoing world and the characters aren't really real people. The point is the idea, and once the idea has been fully expressed, there's nowhere left for that world to go. So where it gets complicated is that the vast amount of the actual creative industry, comics especially, but increasingly prose too, thanks to streaming series adaptation, runs on the series model for obvious economic reasons. Monthly comic issues needed an ongoing story to justify themselves, and nearly every course or book I've taken and read about writing, screenwriting, self-publishing pushes you towards staying in a series. Build a world, plan the sequel before you finish the first book, and keep going, hook people in. And if that's your mode, if you're someone who lives from series to series, then great. That's totally fine. None of this applies to you. You don't need my permission to do what fulfills you, of course. But I am coming at this from a different direction. If you're like me, I prefer, even though I talk a lot about comics and read them, I prefer the standalone one-shot idea, and that's like my honed instinct. And all the creative advice out there that you're going to hear from agents, from authors, from other teachers is going to point you towards making a series. And if that's not what you feel like doing, you're going to spend a lot of time trying to follow other people's advice that isn't going to fulfill you at all and is going to prevent you from actually creating anything good. It doesn't have to be one or the other. The middle ground worth mentioning shows that there's a standalone mentality you can adopt even inside long-running series. You don't need to have read every Batman or Superman comic since the character first appeared to pick up a current issue and follow it. And nowadays, people read those long-running comics for a specific story arc, or because a writer or artist they like got a turn with the character, not because they're tracking 60-plus years of continuity. The story arcs in the series can be very important. Likewise, a lot of people really didn't like the Breaking Bad episode Fly, where they spend the whole time trying to chase a fly out of the lab. I really enjoyed it a lot because to me it was like, I looked at it and thought, this is like a one-act play, and I tried to think, if I knew nothing about the show, if this is all we had of the show, would I know what's going on? Would I be intrigued? And my answer through that whole episode was yes. So I think that is a good example of a standalone mentality within a larger series. For the most part, a lot of comic series that don't feature the same character that's been at it for 60 years, the first story arc tends to be really, really good. You're setting up the world, you're trying to get people interested, so of course you're giving it your best. The first collection of Preacher and the first collection of Sandman, those are both better than any novel I've ever read or any movie I've ever seen. And both of those really kind of blew my mind to the possibilities of graphic storytelling. And there are later volumes in both of those that stand out very well, that you don't really need to have read everything that comes before it to understand. Will you understand more if you've read it? Of course. Is it completely required? No. So I've written and created 2 graphic novels. I don't say drawn because I did it through 3D art programs. But both of my graphic novels, Seahorse and The Rule of Threes, were always going to be standalones. Seahorse ends in a kind of unorthodox open way, but I never planned on having a sequel. I just wrestled with the ending for it for a long time, and the way it ends now is the one that I finally felt the click in my head, like, yes, that's how it's supposed to end. And The Rule of Threes is just 3 different stories, no connected world, no cliffhangers, no nothing. I'm currently working on a novel that was originally planned on the advice of the person running a writing group I was a member of to be 4 separate novellas. That was his thing. Like, you want to develop a series, but you want to start with 4 separate novellas to see what gains traction and such. And so I planned the story out and tried it that way, even though I secretly still only wanted a standalone thing. It just didn't sit right, so I quietly condensed it to 2 novels instead of 4 novellas without, kind of telling everyone. And even then, it's just like, this feels off and wrong, and like, the story doesn't need to be 2 things. And I eventually went with my actual first instinct and made it one standalone book. And so I'm still deep in the rewrite after scrapping most of the first draft while keeping the same world and basic idea and characters and stuff. It's just better. I'm far happier with it this way. There was no reason for it to be a series. I was just following the advice of people who said, if you do this way, you will make money. And he's right. His system works. He's a successful genre author, and he wants the same outcome for people in his group. His system works, which is what drew me in. It wasn't going to work for me specifically because I'm not a series author. I never wanted to be. I don't read series. I have no interest in series. So pretending to be one isn't going to produce anything that people who actually love series would enjoy anyway. It's a lot harder to be a hack than you'd think. If you are sincere about the way you actually work, that sincerity tends to show up in your finished thing, whether or not it ever turns into money or recognition. It at least gets you closer to both of those things, closer than you would be if you were just trying to follow someone else's template, and also closer to an honest, creative, fulfilling life, so you're not chasing whatever the dominant model happens to be this decade. I could no more write a 10-book series than I could change the rate at which my fingernails grow by force of will. Here's the little thought experiment I like to think about. You get one real shot at your most important story. So take that to be however you want. You could take the grand idea, you only get one novel, one script, one thing your entire life. What would it be? And you can apply this to different things too. For instance, what if I got to write a Batman or a Star Trek or a Ninja Turtles or a Rainbow Bright? What story would I tell if I got one shot to do that? Just make sure it's actually the one you want to tell, whether you are writing a series or a standalone or genre or literary. Be true to your vision.